are here, and we are going to do a presentation explaining what has occurred here in Oakridge and what they do and how they assist us to be a more vibrant and healthy community. So I can turn that over to you. Do you want the mic?
I don't know if we need it.
Okay, if you need it, that's fine. Oh, counselors, I would remind you to turn your Bluetooth off so it doesn't interfere with the speaker.
Good afternoon, early evening, everyone. I'm Ron Blackier with Equinox Real Estate. This is my business partner, Scarlett Lee. We're the realtors of record for the city of Oakridge, city certified companies, as well as the industrial park. And we're here, as the mayor had mentioned, to describe what's going on at the park right now and what our hope for the direction is in the future. We have a brief agenda set aside, and we have cards for people if they would like to contact us with questions as well. I didn't bring a projector, I didn't bring cuts of projection, sorry about that.
So we put together an agenda, but we want to leave plenty of time for questions if folks have things that they'd like us to speak to when we're done with our comments. So we're going to blaze through these, and then we're going to try to simultaneously take notes as we visit with you. We did not bring a packet. We're working on that paper reduction, but when we pass out our cards, anybody who'd like to see the collateral material, we will send you links or electronic data on that, and not anybody whatsoever. It's a nice night to come after the delay from the snowstorm. I myself was out of power, but not as long as you folks were. So now that we're all through that, onward, it's also nice to be able to come and celebrate for a few moments that we just had a couple of very significant sales in Oakridge Industrial Park to a company called Texas Pride. These were sort of dream purchasers, and they've got some wonderful plans, and it speaks to a sense of momentum that we've been building. We have had lots of interest over the last few months. We are actively working with 3 different parties, and we'll be visiting with a committee and mayor on a proposal that we've actually got on the table right now. So while we're celebrating that we've had a lot of good activity, we also have to speak to the fact that, nationally, regionally, and locally, we're having some real changes in the real estate market. I don't think this is a secret to anybody who follows it, but we feel that in both our other parts of our practice, there's just been less phone ringing all the way around. And we've done some research and have some good information that we can dispense that talks about, this is true again nationally, what have the changes been in Lane County over the last year. We've also got information on Douglas County because we kind of sit in the cusp of those things. There's always a challenge when you're trying to get a project off the ground to create that sense of lift and then hang on to it. And we've worked through this. We know that it is very much about the moment, and we're grateful that we've now got an audience that is responding really quickly when we do bring transactions to bear. So let's keep this going through the spring. The market generally declining does give us a little opportunity as buyers who've been disgruntled or on the sidelines might be now coming back into a market when they gain a little bit more traction on their side of the agenda. We don't have a formal way to pass this back and forth, so we're just going to talk over the top of each other. Your turn.
As Scarlett mentioned, the cooling of the residential market has its effects on the overall market, and things do tend to fluctuate, rise and flow with one another in the commercial industrial realm. Our main task is to help bring some development to the industrial park, bringing industry, whatever it may be, some business, and hopefully jobs and more people to make the community more vibrant, more economically healthy. We do face some headwinds as a country, as a state, and locally here as well. Given that shift, and as Scarlett mentioned, we do have to stay on top of that. The Oregon Senate about 2 weeks ago just passed a rent control bill. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but they have capped rents at a 7% plus inflation adjusted amount that will change on an annual basis. That is gonna affect the ability or the desire of certain investors to want to continue to invest in real estate, and it's gonna get some people out of the market. Again, that's gonna affect all of us throughout the state. We're the first state in the country to have this rent control legislation.
Over time, there's no doubt that we will adjust to this, and of course, we're talking about residential rental property because it's kind of the canary in the mine shaft. It's the best predictor for how we're gonna fare in terms of commercial and industrial property. And for the short run, we're gonna have a certain quelling, chilling effect on that market. You know, there are lots of different parts of this philosophy, and we do want affordable housing, and maybe there are some advantages in a community like Oakridge that doesn't suffer from being outpriced completely for residential properties.
I was gonna say, you might be better at explaining the pendings that you have here too. Or that's something we're gonna do in terms of, as part of our packet, we prepared a list of pending property. Like I said, the main focus of our talk is gonna be about the industrial park and about commercial industrial land at this moment. And Scarlett has prepared some pending properties that are very similar in size, in terms of the size of the community, in terms of the size of the potential investment from around the state.
It's a difficult thing to sort comparable properties to help guide us on what the value should be and what kind of interest we should be expecting in Oakridge. So I do a regular survey of the entire state. The very best comparables to Oakridge Industrial Park is actually in Hood River. And I made sure those brokers who are dealing with the same sort of tertiary market industrial land know me and know what my project is. And of course, we're also trying to get our finger on the competition. This is a little bit of a bittersweet piece of the analysis because I have in front of me the 11 pending sales in the entire state of Oregon in properties that are comparable, again, being smaller communities and perhaps off the main arterials. You know, the sweet part is we haven't missed a lot of buyers. If there are only 11 pending sales statewide, the downside is that does speak to what kind of demand we've got, and we're doing our best to make the most of every inquiry we get because there are just not very many of them happening. Now, had we taken this a little while ago, it would have been 14 and we'd have been 2 of them. So, so that's what we're gonna get to. We have a tiny bit of old business, and I want to thank Rick for being such great support for us. We have a tail to the transaction we just closed in that there were some easement issues that needed to be fully acquitted after closing, and we are being the mother hen, but actually we're following Rick because he's well ahead of that with us. And we want to continue to support those parts of the process. It isn't over at a particular point in time. And obviously, when we do have a buyer come in, we want his contact list too. He's coming from another area and we'd like to make the most of that. On the other side of the scale, in old business, you know, it's funny, barges turn slowly, and we have just really gotten to the point where we feel like we've gathered all the information that we needed to have that information, that full complement to pass along. And so again, thank you for those who, I know it's been phone call after phone call after phone call, but I think we have finally now drawn that together and we can make more credible presentations than we could at first. Moving on to new business, there are some suggestions that we have on how to keep this momentum rolling. And one of those is a discussion amongst yourselves and or with us in talking about doing some modification of the existing zoning. Again, talking to Rick about this for a project that he has underway that's going to require zoning changes. And we've seen that there have been inquiries for things like live-work opportunities or tiny home development that just really don't exactly fit into an industrial setting. The freeway frontage lots, the 20s, might well be targets for an expanded set of use definitions that would allow us to bring in some commercial or office, or at least companion those with some sort of an industrial or manufacturing aspect, and expand that market of few buyers to a few more buyers.
And when she says the 20, the lot numbers are, that's the strip along Kokanee. So there's several small ones that are probably prime, but interestingly enough, it's taken, I don't know how, 15, I don't know, Rick can speak better to this than I can, but it's taken a long time to gain this much traction. We get a lot more inquiries and a lot more requests with regard to the larger properties to the north of the industrial park. And we feel if we get those developed, we get that lift and that traction that Scarlett's talking about, but we really think it should transfer to those lots that are along Kokanee quite well. They lack a bit of infrastructure development, so we'll be coming back to the council as some of this money hopefully comes into, and it's able to be reinvested to supply a greater level of infrastructure. I think those lots will be very popular. They're gonna provide that live-work scenario that Scarlett's talking about, but that's also gonna require some sort of applications on the city's part.
Through the process of first delivering this information to you and then answering any questions, maybe we can form an outline for action items on that zoning. I think it is one of the two real key impediments that we've had to broadening our interest. The second, and Ron just touched on this, is the infrastructure. This is a round process, and we've learned you start somewhere. You know, you don't have to start at the beginning, you just jump in and start somewhere. But we have rediscovered, and I've discovered this many times, that shovel-ready is what the market demands. And if you can't offer water, sewer, and electrical service, you just don't have a lot of takers. You know, we have offered properties where literally what someone can do is go stand on it, and let's up that game. I mean, that is our second big recommendation. And that gets us, are we talking really fast?
You're doing great.
That gets us to the last thing that we wanted to put before the council. We sell property. I mean, that's what we do. And that does delve into the development processes and all kinds of other realms. But we don't make the decisions. Oakridge makes the decisions. We want to put in front of you the idea of making those balancing decisions so that we have better instructions. There are a number of lots that have been, are they available or are they not? As you all weigh whether you have utility with your public works or planned public infrastructure park, we don't know where that lies, but on one side of it we have economic development, job creation, and dollars, and on the other side we've got social, cultural, environmental values, or the practical and functional things, again, with your public works. We'd like to work with you to refine that so that we're better executing your agenda. Otherwise, we're just gonna sell them all, and that's all there is to it.
Thank you.
Interestingly enough, the industrial park is that versatile where it has all that going on, so we, as a group, need to sort of refine that in a way that we'll all be able to market that in a more effective manner.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your thoughts, and I appreciate your three points about doing something about the zoning, getting them shovel ready, and then also determining and giving you some solid direction as to what lots really are available and what lots we don't want you to sell because we have other plans for them, and that's important. Council, so the way this usually works, so you understand, is if they have something that comes up, they usually will contact the city administrator and the mayor and say, we have something, and then Rick and we take a look at it, and then pass it on, depending on what the timeline is, get ODAC's opinion and response. Sometimes the timeline surprisingly has been really quick. They want responses right away, and we just don't move that fast up here, but we're learning to move faster. That is a challenge. So that's how we've been working it, and then at some point, you know, it comes to council. So that's how it's usually working, and I think it has been working pretty well. I see your hand. I'll be sure and call you. Don't let me forget.
When
So when you said you have comparable communities and you have 11 pending sales or kind of right now or across the board, what kind of development is being snapped up? Is it location or is it type?
You know, unfortunately, it's not a large enough sample for you to look at it and conclude there's a trend or there's something in particular that we should be looking for. We have everything from single user housing their own personal exotic car collection and needing to build industrial building for that purpose, to small amounts of expansion, although that has tailed off statewide. We are not refilling the mill with expansion space the way we had. We do have a certain number of tenants that like to move into ownership. So I think 2 of these were electrical contractors who had outgrown their lease space and thought it was time to get their own shops. It's all over the place.
So I just want to bring up, and I bet Rick can speak to this more, so one of the problems that we have with the zoning is that we are an industrial park that was purchased with USDA funds. And because of that, there are some regulations, and because we still owe them money, it's not really ours, it's still theirs, kind of. So we have to have a percentage of our land that is, it meets their percentages of industrial, light industrial, I don't know if there's a third category or not. And that's not to say that we can't do it, but it creates an interesting challenge because we have to ask for exceptions. Is that what I meant?
Well,
variances.
With the last zone change we did, DLCD was a little concerned that we were removing light industrial. The last zone change was from light industrial to mixed use. And initially they were concerned about that. Through the report, I was able to show that we, percentage-wise, still have more industrial than we did before in the 80s. So it went through that way, but we're gonna cross that again.
Council, any questions that you would like? Lauren, you have a question.
You brought it up. I want to know the structure of ownership of the property.
Okay.
And one question, are there any restrictions as to what kind of business or et cetera, the property can or cannot be used for?
I don't think we can
There's
do
a-
marijuana type of businesses.
No, we can't do marijuana because it's federal.
We have enough of those.
We do.
No.
Yeah. So to answer Lauren's questions, if you didn't hear, is no, there isn't. We don't have
It's per zoning,
per zoning.
yes.
So our zoning is what dictates what can go on that particular property.
That's correct.
So, any other questions, council, that you would like to pose? Any other questions, community? Sarah?
I do have a question about infrastructure. Do you find that that high-speed internet is an infrastructure need that is desired in the industrial spaces?
Typically, everybody's trying to, and it sort of speaks to what the mayor mentioned earlier too, about the speed with which Oakridge is able to respond sometimes. As there's a commercial on TV that says, business travels at the speed of light, and I think, we've all become, try and spend, 24 hours without your phone, that sort of thing. It's the direction everything is headed, and industry as well. Whether they're trying to transact commercially or making their orders or placing orders or whatever it may be.
So quick follow-up, if we are thinking about infrastructure investments in the park, if we are already putting in infrastructure, would it be smart then to go ahead and wire that so it can be easily plugged in from each lot? Or is that something that a purchaser, they can negotiate as part of the purchase?
Well, there is some limitation on what a buyer can effectively negotiate right now because the distances to some lots are prohibitive in terms of cost. So this is normally something that cascades over time. I will also say that while fiber is critically important and those kinds of electronic services, water and sewer and electricity are going to preempt those for most users most of the time. If they've got to do without one of those things, we're all pretty sure what that's going to be. And perhaps the straight up manufacturing or industrial user is slightly less sensitive than would be an office user, a call center, those kinds of uses. But yeah, we kind of need it all. That package is what makes a piece of property viable in the marketplace.
And I think as we move forward, there have been discussions, and it's a little awkward because I don't have a city administrator right now, but as we get to the point where we can begin to think about what we need to do up there in the next couple months and talk about budgeting processes. You know, we did just sell the Texas Pride. So we have an amount of money, and what is the wisest way to use that to support the infrastructure, and what are we gonna do? So those are all questions that are gonna be coming before council, and we'll look to ODEC to give recommendations to in the future, or in the near future, one would hope. So. Any other comments before we move on?
I have one thing to
Yes.
answer your comment, because while you have been moving our direction and trying to respond quickly when we have a proposal, while we know that buyer is also looking in Madras and wherever else they are, we're doing our best to keep them in grips. I really appreciate that you've made that effort. We are also taking that as an opportunity to set expectations with our buyers, to explain that this is a municipality and we're not gonna get an answer by 5 o'clock this afternoon,
Right.
the way you might expect one if we were working in downtown Portland.
Right.
So we're doing our best to put that time frame into something that's practical and palatable. When we ring the alarm bell, it'll be serious, it's something that needs immediate attention, but when we don't have to do that, we're gonna certainly give you as much latitude
Okay,
as we can.
well, I appreciate that, thank you. Thank you so much for coming up and sharing with us where we are and what we're doing, and some of the opportunities ahead of us and some of the challenges.
That was a tough act to follow, by the way.
Yeah.
I know, it wasn't.
That's like Sarah in the car.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Let's see, what do